各位同事，我哋而家夠人，亦都夠鐘開會啦。
Members, we have formed a quorum, so let's get started. We have issued some papers since the last meeting, and actually there's one. We have a land registry statistics for December 2014 provided by the administration. Items for discussion at the next meeting, please refer to CB1 483 1415 bracket 01, list of outstanding items. So please invite the officials to join us. The next meeting will be held at 2:30 on the 2nd of March. The administration has proposed two items: review of the special stamp duty and buyer stamp duty. All electrical members are invited to join us for this item. Second, review of public rental housing income and asset limits 2015-16, and the other one, and this one on the creation of a chief architect. In view of the long agenda, we would extend our meeting from 2:30 to 5:30. We've also agreed to organize a public hearing that will take place on the 21st of March 2015, a Saturday at 9 a.m. The Secretariat would issue a notice to members and also put a notice on our website to invite deputations to come. I would like to remind the member who proposed this public hearing to come on that day, because we may have a full-day meeting. So members, please remember to attend the meeting. Don't run the risk of aborting the meeting. The public hearing will cover a wider topic, and that is apart from the long-term housing strategy report, we also cover the housing-related issues in the policy address. So if you know anyone is interested in coming to the public hearing, please extend our invitation to them. Next item. Briefing by the Secretary for Transport and Housing on the Chief Executive's 2015 Policy Address is paper CB1 437 1415 bracket 01. And we have also got other relevant papers such as a policy agenda booklet. So over to the Secretary for an opening speech, and then we would have a Q&A session. Chairperson, I would like to brief the panel today on the housing-related initiatives set out in the 2015 Policy Address. The current housing problem in Hong Kong is both complex and serious. With a serious supply-demand imbalance and high property prices and rental level, the government is determined to increase housing supply, rebuild the housing ladder, and play a more active role in housing through the provision of public housing. We aim at providing 290,000 public housing units in the coming 10 years and have been actively identifying suitable sites. I briefed members on the newly announced long-term housing strategy at the panel meeting last month. Under the supply-led strategy, apart from increasing the production of public rental housing, PRH units, and subsidized sales flats, the government would also endeavor to facilitate the circulation of PRH and subsidized sales flats, expand the forms of subsidized home ownership, and leverage on other public and private organizations' capacity to increase the supply of subsidized sales flats. We also briefed members of this council on the Hong Kong Housing Authority (HA's) construction program and progress in December last year. In respect of PRH, the HA will continue to maintain the target of providing the first flat offer to general applicants, i.e. family and elderly one-person applicants, at around 3 years on average. In the coming 5 years, from 2014-15 to 2018-19, we estimate that a total of 77,100 PRH units will be completed, among which 23,300 units are scheduled for completion in 2015-16. The HA will closely monitor the construction program to ensure timely completion. Meanwhile, the HA will also continue to implement measures to ensure the rational use of PRH resources. Last week, the Ombudsman commented on the mechanism to review and to monitor the eligibility of existing tenants in public housing. The HA will consider the Ombudsman's comments in relation to the granting of new tenancy, the harmonious family schemes, as well as well-off tenants policies. In terms of operation, I agree that there is room for improvement in some of the cases in order to strike a better balance between reasons and sympathy. As regards the coordination between the HA and the Hong Kong Housing Society, Hong Kong HAS, the prevailing mechanism already allows the two organizations to exchange the relevant information in a timely manner. In view of the Ombudsman's recommendation, we will study how we can enhance the administrative measure to handle cases with dual tenant status. We will adopt a multi-pronged approach to increase the supply of subsidized sales flats. In the coming 5 years, there will be more than 10,000 newly built HOS units by the HA, and about 4,700 HOS units will be put up for pre-sale in the coming 2 years. In addition, the Hong Kong HAS will put up a total of about 1,600 subsidized sales units for pre-sale in 2016-17. These add up to a total of 6,300 units. Moreover, the HA will review the pre-sale schedule of HOS projects from time to time and put up projects for pre-sale as and when appropriate. To further improve the housing ladder, the Chief Executive proposed in the policy address that the HA should identify suitable projects among its PRH developments under construction for sale to green form applicants in the form of a pilot scheme with prices set at a level lower than those of HOS flats. This green form home ownership pilot scheme can enhance the circulation of PRH. On the one hand, it can help general green form applicants achieve home ownership in a more affordable way. On the other hand, it will not reduce the supply of PRH, as for every PRH flat sold to an applicant, a PRH flat will be released for allocation to those on the waiting list for PRH. The scheme can therefore achieve dual objectives in one go. The HA has started to consider the implementation details of this proposal, including eligibility criteria, price setting mechanism, resale restriction, sales site selection principle, etc. The HA will take into account views of the community in the process. In addition to the HA and the Hong Kong HS, the government will actively explore ways to increase the supply of subsidized sales spreads to other public or non-profit-making organizations such as the Urban Renewal Authority and Hong Kong Settlers Housing Corporation Limited. In addition, taking into account the previous experience, including the private sector participation scheme and the mixed development pilot scheme, the government will actively explore ways to leverage on the private sector's capacity to supplement the Hong Kong government's effort in increasing the supply of subsidized sales spread. I understand that existing tenants of Tai Hang Sai Estate are very concerned about HKSHCL's plan to redevelop the Tai Hang Sai Estate. The estate is a rental housing estate constructed and managed by Hong Kong SHCL. It's not owned nor managed by the HA, and the redevelopment plan of Tai Hang Sai Estate is not under the HA. I understand the Hong Kong SHCL is still considering viable options, and its objective is to increase the number of flats through redevelopment, while continue to address the housing needs of existing residents of Tai Hang Sai Estate. Any redevelopment plan cannot ignore the rehousing needs of existing tenants. The HKSHCL will be responsible for such arrangements, and existing tenants should not get too worried for the time being. The redevelopment may involve a modification of lease provisions of the lot, payment of premium, and amendment of the planning requirements. The government will consider relevant arrangements and discuss with the HKSHCL when the latter submits a more concrete proposal. Lastly, on private property market, we note that property prices started to rise again in mid-2014. Under the global context of low interest rates and quantitative easing, had the government not introduced 2 rounds of demand management measures in end 2012 and early 2013 respectively, the property market might have been even more volatile, with the stability of Hong Kong economy and financial system being compromised. The government is concerned about the situation of the property market and will continue to take actions as necessary to help stabilize the property market and prevent the adverse consequences arising from an overheated property market. We will report the outcome of the review of the buyer stamp duty and enhanced special stamp duty to the panel in March this year. On private housing supply, as at end of December 2014, the supply of first-hand private residential flats for the coming 3 or 4 years is estimated to be around 74,000 units, a record high since the release of quarterly statistics on private housing supply in primary market in September 2004. It is projected that the private sector will on average produce 14,600 flats each year in the next 5 years, representing an increase of about 30% compared to the average production in the past 5 years. Chairperson, the current government is determined to gradually avert this serious supply-demand imbalance in housing. To resolve the structural problem in housing, we need the support from both the community and the Legislative Council. We call upon all sectors in the society, district councils and local communities to accord priority to overall housing needs of the society by maintaining an open attitude towards the identification of sites for housing developments and support the government to achieve the long-term housing supply target. Thank you, Chairperson. Every member will have 5 minutes for questions and answers now. Ms. Chen Yuhan. First of all, I have every sympathy for the current administration, because the last administration and that before the last did very little on the housing front. So people were very angry. They had certain suspicions that there was collusion between government and property developers. And now we are facing a housing problem. We will monitor the government with regard to the measures to be implemented. We understand the difficulties with which sites can be identified and the hard work of the officials. But you have to think through your policies. Don't rush into proposals. For example, the green form, HOS for green formers. There are people who cannot get PRH. Their income exceeds the limit, but they cannot afford HOS. So the FTU proposed a new housing program. If you listen to us, you wouldn't be in such a situation now. Now you have this scheme for green form applicants. People are questioning why you are providing additional benefits to green form applicants. Is it not double benefit? And so the response is not going to be very warm, and people won't thank you for that. Why didn't you listen to our proposal? And now you have this neither here nor there proposal. And now you want to identify more sites?
Of course, you work on aged PRH estates, but I was told once by the HA officials that if we build a housing in East Kowloon, we may not stand to benefit because of the distribution of population, the number of units available after redevelopment may not be high. So why don't you give some thinking over redeveloping Choi Hong Estate and other estates in the region when you propose to build housing estates in a very small site? Well, we're not really against those pencil-like buildings, but indeed there are other redevelopment projects that you can work on. Thirdly, in the past you agreed to review the legislation over rental control. Well, now it seems that the idea has been shelved again. Maybe you should give this a rethink, because many cannot afford to buy their own home. So why didn't you go ahead with rent control consideration? Is it because you are in fear of property owners? Well, about allowing green farmers to buy HOS flat or PRH flats at a lower price as a form of a pilot scheme. Well, as I said in the beginning, there are still details to be ironed out. But according to opinion polls, there is support for this initiative. And of course, there are different views as well. Well, Ms. Chen Yunhan mentioned redevelopment projects for some housing estates in East Kowloon. Well, in HA's view, if redeveloping an aged PRH estate could could achieve better cost effectiveness instead of maintaining an aged estate that provides fewer units, then this can be considered. On rent control, indeed, in a CUHK seminar, I undertook that I would look into that, and the THB conducted a study on the issue of rent control in Hong Kong in the past, and also experience in other jurisdictions like UK and US. And last July, this panel discussed the report of the study. Now, my question hasn't been answered. Why didn't you conduct any consultation before you roll out that pilot scheme for green farmers? Well, it's not that we did not do any consultation. In the course of formulating long-term housing strategy, we heard views that if the administration could come up with other ways, if the TPS will not be reintroduced. So we didn't really start from scratch. Next, Mr. Wong Kwok Heng, followed by Mr. Wu Chi Wai. Thank you. Madam Chair, I have a number of questions for Secretary. So some quick questions and answers, please. First of all, some HOS owners told me that because of changes in the family circumstances, I mean in terms of the number of people in the household, the flat has become more spacious and they would like to rent the place out. And the question is on whether there is any mechanism for HOS owners to lease the flat. Of course, the owners are somewhat subsidized. I wonder if administratively consideration could be given. So would you look into that? Point number one. Point number two, the government is not going ahead with rent control. So I won't repeat the point. But will there be any other measures to help those tenants renting a place with less than $5,000 a month? Because at present they don't have tenancy agreements and they could be driven away by owners very easily. So what measures are there to help them? Question number three. Many have reflected to me the view that they would like to buy their own home and they may not be eligible for HOS and they may not be able to seek help from parents. So would the government consider the Home Starter loan scheme again, so as to help those who are unable to afford the down payment? Now, on whether subletting of HOS could be allowed, I recall that this issue had been explored at the panel and council meetings. Now, we don't exclude the possibility of studying the issue, but in late 70s, when the HOS was first introduced, under the law, unless the HA consents, subletting is not allowed. And HA's position is that subletting should not be allowed because the HOS scheme should not be used as a tool for people to make a living. Well, I won't reject you outright, the idea of looking into that, but it's not easy. Now, on rent control, of course we're concerned over high rental at the moment, but this is a double-edged sword, because as we said before, introduction of rent control may cause rents to go up further. Now, in the course of formulating the long-term housing strategy, we also considered the last point. But with very severe shortage of housing supply at the moment, if we introduce home loan or interest-free home loan or subsidy, then a signal will be sent, or a message will be sent to the market that there is still room for housing prices and rent to go up, and this is not what the government would like to see. But for the first question, I thank Secretary for telling me that he will not reject the idea outright. I hope the government would really submit a paper to us telling us the pros and cons of subletting HOS flats. If the household structure has changed, then why should we waste the extra space in the flat? The household may not be wishing to make a living anyway. This is just for reducing SDUs, subdivided flats in the market. And this can help everyone. So I hope the government would submit the paper to LegCo as soon as possible. For question number 2, at present, the government is not intended to introduce rental control again. So what can be done to improve the existing condition in which some tenants are not protected by a tenancy agreement and could be driven away by owners very easily? Again, I hope the government will submit a paper for the panel to discuss the issue. Again, in the paper, you should set out the pros and cons for us to explore the issue. Well, in the long-term housing strategy paper, we mentioned that we would work with NGOs on promulgating good practices rental matters. Next, Mr. Wu Chiwai. In paragraph 4 of your speaking notes, Secretary, I note that as this policy address points out, that you like to leverage on the URA's capacity to increase the supply of subsidized sale flats. So that means I'm not against the whole idea, but judging from the unit construction cost of the URA at the moment, you need to come up with something like reintroducing sandwich class housing so that you can really have subsidized sale flats at a reasonable price level made available to the market. So will you consider afresh whether the sandwich class housing scheme should be introduced, and that this should be the policy direction in the long term, so that the sandwiched class could also be looked after, and also if the URA takes part in the construction of subsidized sale flat, since those sites available to URA come from the private sector, this will cause decrease in the supply of private of housing in the private market. So, if according to the long-term housing strategy target, there should be 200,000 flats supplied in the private market. What measures does the government have to make up for the shortfall? Lastly, on numerous occasions, I already mentioned this point. That is, whether there could be more flexibility in terms of government policies. Now, according to the logic of the HOS scheme, the HOS flats should not be made available for sale in the market. But according to your policy, after residing in the flat for a period of time, you could sell the HOS flat in the secondary market. Now, in the same vein, can you allow HOS owners to lease their or rent their flat out and the profit to be shared a portion of the profit to be shared with the government, so as to address the problem of changes in the household structure, and also at the same time to prevent HOS owners from making a profit from leasing out the flat. Well, as I said in reply to a written question last Wednesday, policy-wise, we do not intend to reintroduce sandwich class housing scheme, because if we need to set aside resources for this kind of housing out of the total resources available, this may not achieve the effect of helping the middle class. But in the CE's policy address, because of the keen demand, the government will consider all the sites available. The URA has been invited to consider whether it has the capacity and sites available for supplying subsidized sale flats. As for the private market, our 10-year projection, 10-year demand projection, and on this basis, the 10-year housing target is 2,900,000 public housing and 180,000 private housing. So this is about distribution of the mix or the mix based on demand. On subletting, I understand Mr. Wu also mentioned in the past whether the HOS owner could give a share to the government if the flat is leased out. And as I replied to Mr. Wong Kwok Heng's question just now, the purpose of HOS scheme is to provide housing to owners on a subsidized basis instead of allowing them to make a profit. So we need to be very prudent as far as the policy is concerned. Mr. Frederick Fong, followed by Kwok Wai Keung and Leung Chi Chung. I have two questions, Madam Chair, for the Secretary. In paragraph 64 of the policy address, the HA, the Hong Kong Housing Society, URA, the Hong Kong Settlers Housing Corporation Limited, and other NGOs would consider the increasing the supply of subsidized sale flats. And my question is on Tai Hang Sai Estate. And in para 11 of Secretary speaking notes, it is said that HA has nothing to do with Tai Hang Sai Estate. Now, Chief Executive did mention HA. Now you are singling the HA out. So should we believe in Secretary or Chief Executive? And in para 11, you mentioned that Tai Hang Sai Estate doesn't come under the HA. Does it mean that it's not? It doesn't belong to the government? Does it mean that all the projects under the Hong Kong SHCL don't belong to the government? And another point is about rehousing the existing residents of Tai Hang Sai Estates. For model housing estate, it's also developed by the Hong Kong SHCL, and the residents were rehoused. Why not residents of Tai Hang Sai Estate? Well, in para 12, you mentioned that we cannot ignore the housing needs of existing tenants. Does it mean that the government or the HA will take up this responsibility? That is, for the 1,200 residents of Tai Hang Sai Estate, will the HA be responsible for rehousing? Now, the second question has to do with the allowing green farmers to buy PRH flats at the lower price. Well, nothing was mentioned before. Nothing was mentioned until the announcement of the policy address. Now, why is it that throughout the 18 months consultation process, nothing was mentioned about the scheme, and then without going through any consultation at all, now you roll out this scheme, and it will affect the long-term housing strategy, because out of the 290,000 public housing units, some 200,000 will be PRH, and now some 90,000 will be made available for sale. Why is it that one order from the Chief Executive could override all the work done by Secretary and the Long-Term Housing Strategy Committee? And we have been discussing the long-term housing strategy. We only discussed it once, and now things have changed, and there have not been consultations with the community. Why is it that you need to you take resources away from public housing resources? If 9,000 per year would be for HOS, why can't you divide it up into 2 tiers, so that in one of the tiers, flats could be sold at 50% the original?
And the same objective of facilitate circulation of PRH flats can be achieved. PRH units are to cater for people in genuine need. And now you use a PRH for sale. It's for home ownership. Secretary, 2 questions, 2 issues. Tai Hang Sai Estate is not an estate owned or managed by the HA. In the past, in respect of model estate, the relevant organization handed back the estate to HA. The HA took it over, and therefore it was responsible for rehousing the tenants. But now the Hong Kong Settlers Housing Corporation Limited would like to redevelop Tai Hang Sai Estate, and with more units developed, they may be able to do something to increase the housing supply, to enhance, to facilitate home ownership. But it will take the corporation, HSCL, to come up with the proposal. And in the process, maybe some lease modification will be required, land premium may have to be paid. So the HA, the administration would actively pursue this with the HKSHCL. When I talk about any redevelopment plan cannot ignore the rehousing needs of existing tenants, I was talking about the responsibility of HKSHCL. As for the Green Form Home Ownership Pilot Scheme, well, I've already touched on this in answering other members' questions. During the consultation on the long-term housing strategy, some people asked if we could promote home ownership among the PRH tenants, and we were asked whether to reintroduce the TPS, but we have decided not to reintroduce the TPS. And Mr. Frederick Fong is asked also why we do not introduce a 2-tier HOS system. Well, actually, this was considered after the administration has received the report from the Long-Term Housing Strategy Steering Committee. We have the view that this Green Form Home Ownership Pilot Scheme has more merits. But of course, we will continue to listen to the community, and so this is going to be a pilot scheme. But we can certainly consider how better we can promote home ownership through various means. It's been mentioned in the LTHS that there will be 90,000 units in the public sector for sale, which will be for sale. In the document, we are going to have 10,000 HOS units. What about the remaining 80,000? Are we going to provide all the 50,000 units in the coming 5 years? And what kind of HOS units would they be? Would you also count the Green Form Home Ownership Pilot Scheme as well as HOS? Well, HOS used to serve an important function of promoting circulation of PRH units. But in the current HOS scheme, the majority applicants are white farmers. Only a small minority is green farmers. Is it because the HOS prices are pegged to the market levels, and so the prices are not affordable to green farmers, and therefore we have so many white farm applicants? So instead of setting another scheme for green farmers, I hope the Bureau would look at the way HOS prices are set. Let's get to the roots of the problem. If you adjust the prices of HOS, you make HOS affordable to all, and there's no need to have another green farm home ownership pilot scheme. And also, I want to ask again whether you're going to introduce another sandwich class home ownership scheme for those earning $16,000 to $30,000 because they cannot afford to buy in the private market. So this rung in the home ownership ladder is too big for them to climb. So these people are not eligible for PRH, and they want to get an HOS unit and they can't. So would the government consider doing something to help them? And we haven't really discussed the green farm home ownership pilot scheme, and now it's about to be launched. So I hope you would avoid speculation, pushing up the prices of these units under the green farm home ownership pilot scheme. Secretary, in the coming 10 years, we are going to set for ourselves a target of 290,000 housing units in the public sector, including PRH and HOS units. The size that we have identified will allow us to build 254,000 public sector units. We still need to identify land for the remaining 30,000 odd units. And it's true that more will be produced in the latter half of the 10-year period, because we were unable to meet the demand in the past, and now we have to do some catch-up. All along, there were more white farm applicants than green farm applicants under the HOS scheme, because green farmers are PRH tenants, and they may not be able to afford to buy HOS units because of the high property prices. There are more white farm applicants, so this is nothing unusual. The price of an HOS unit is usually 70% of the market level, but this is not cast in iron. The HA will look at the established formula and to make sure that white farm applicants will be able to afford the mortgage, and 50% of them will be able to afford 40% of the units. As the chief executive has said, the pilot scheme would mean that we can further lower the threats for sale to green farmers. Mr. Leung Chi-Chung, thank you for coming to our meeting, Secretary. The DAB is in support of the public rental housing construction program. Some colleagues have asked some questions about the housing target. You don't even have sufficient land for the target production figures. The Secretary hasn't answered this question. Last week, in our question time, I put this question to you. You want to build 128,000 units in Yunnan. And you're talking about 400,000 tenants. So population intake will happen 10 years later. You are also responsible for transport, but you haven't mentioned anything to tie in with the new population. And you're still short of 40,000 public housing units. Let's say if you want to get more land from Yunnan, will the local councillors support you? You haven't mentioned where the sites will be, but according to the plans submitted by the Development Bureau, they are looking at green belts. Many of them are in Yunnan. Have you talked to the Development Bureau? We can't cope with so many new tenants moving in. Transportation cannot cope. Who will bear the ultimate responsibility if something goes wrong? So what about infrastructure, transport, services? How can you tie in with proper transport services? People have to go to work or go to school. These are real problems. So you don't want to impose rent control. Can you adopt an alternative approach? Can you provide a rent subsidy? Your pledge is to provide a PRH to waiting list applicants in 3 years. If you provide a subsidy, then they can be assured that they would get a unit in the promised time, and in the meantime they get some help in the form of a subsidy. You are relying on the community care fund in providing some one-off grants, and they are not really assured. In the northwest NT and in particular in Yunnan, there will be many public housing projects, and it's important to make sure that the transport services can cope. I mentioned this in the last meeting. I mentioned the same in answering the members' question. We will look at how transport can be improved in Northwest NT. Actually, internally within the government, we have a mechanism that in approving housing projects, we will have to conduct a transport impact assessment first, and there are other studies as well. So we are not saying that there will be no impact, but is the impact acceptable? That we have to balance the different needs. Well, you have yet to identify more sites. If you want to go to Yunnan again, will the district council support you? You have to understand our views.
Chairman, I understand Mr. Leung's view very well because he is also chairman of DC, and when I consult the local DCs, I often hear the view, and I also have another platform on which we explore this issue with the TTCs of DCs, and at panel meetings and council meetings, we already explained the government's position on rent control. If the government introduces rent subsidy, that is a message for owners to jack up the rent. So it may not be effective, and the consequence may not be one we wish to see. And this may not be the best use of public money. We understand, of course, the concerns in the community over high rental. And the crux of the matter is that we don't have sufficient supply. Next, Mr. Vincent Fang. Secretary. Well, I need to give you my support for the Green Farm Home Ownership Pilot Scheme. This is different from previous schemes because the whole block will be sold to green farmers, unlike the approach in TPS with divided shares. Now, but I do have reservations over the pricing, and that it will be less than 50% of the market rate. One regards successfully applying for PRH flat, winning the lottery already, or winning the Mark 6 already. And if the applicant then successfully applies for the purchase of the flat under the pilot scheme, then this applicant will be winning Mark 6 twice. So it seems rather unfair to others. And for the sitting tenant, he may have been living in PRH unit for over 10 years, and the savings over 10 years may already allow him to pay the down payment for mortgage of a flat. Whereas for white farmers, for HOS flats, they're required to pay the HOS price level. So my question is whether the applicant in the pilot scheme should be allowed another opportunity to win the Mark 6. Now, you see in the situation, only some 10,000 odd green farmers for the recent HOS scheme, but 100,000 white farmers. So, Secretary, have you conducted any statistics for tenants who have been living in a PRH flat for such a long time? Have their economic or financial situation improved to a state much better than a white farmer? Now, about TPS. Now, there are still loose ends. Last time I asked Secretary, there are some 50,000 TPS flats in surplus. Any idea how the remaining stock would be disposed of? My suggestion is to sell those in at a lower rate, lower price, so as to address the problem of a surplus stock of TPS. Well, I thank Mr. Fang for his support on the Green Farm Home Ownership Pilot Scheme. We have not said that the pricing under the pilot scheme would be 50% of the market level. Of course, I know that there have been some suggestions in the community, but this is just part of the discussion. What we say is that the prices would be set at the level lower than those of HOS flats. We will consider carefully pricing matters, and in the course we will consider the community's perception over this scheme. It has to do with the fairness of the scheme, because there are also white farmers for HOS flats. And in terms of fairness, well, theoretically speaking, a premium, be it paid at a discount, would still have to be paid. And once sold to these applicants, we wonder if those applicants will be regarded as abusing public housing resources, and this will be a negative perception. And we need to take a holistic view in formulating our policy, and we'll continue to listen to views. We'll of course discuss with LegCo in ironing out the details. And Mr. Fang is also right in pointing out that we have 39 TPS at the moment, 39 estates designated to be TPS estates. 70% of the flats in these TPS estates have been sold. Some 30% remained with the HA. And we do not force the tenants to be rehoused elsewhere because that estate is a TPS if the tenant refuses to buy the flat. So it's hard to tell when we would be able to make available all these units now being rented out. And there may be other problems. So if we could come up with ways to encourage tenants of these 39 TPS estates to either buy or buy the flat or move elsewhere, then this would be good. But of course, we need to be careful. First, Mr. Tony Chair, Dr. Fernando Zhang. Well, the long-term housing strategy wasn't announced until last December after lengthy discussions, but nothing was mentioned about the sale of HRS flats. And yet, in the policy address, all of a sudden, we see the scheme. The consultation process, the discussion process was very long. Although we're not happy with the target, 90,000 in 10 years, we have 260,000 applicants on the waiting list for PRH, and you need to reserve certain proportion out of the 200,000 flats in 10 years for sale. And there have never been any discussion. Even for TPS, it has been suspended for 10 years already. And now you have come up with some form of scheme to sell PRH flats. Well, if you had this in mind, why hadn't you explained clearly in the long-term housing strategy report? All of a sudden, when C.Y. Leung said that the flats should be up for sale, the flats will be put up for sale. Now, can you tell us the details? When will it be launched? What scale would the scheme be? Does it mean the chief executive could override the years of discussion? Secretary, you yourself over the years said that PRH flats would not be sold. Now you are going the other way. Well, the 200,000 flats are supposed to be rented, not supposed to be sold. For green farmers, for PRH flats, there are ways to improve circulation of PRH instead of selling the flats. So please explain to us in detail. We're talking about the most needy group, the grassroots who are unable to afford to buy their own home, and you're going to reduce the number of PRH flats available to them. The total demand in the coming 10 years have been projected by the long-term housing strategy, and on this basis we have formulated the 10-year housing target. We have taken into account the public housing demand in the market. And when the Green Farm Home Ownership Pilot Scheme is introduced, this will not cause a decrease in the supply of PRH flats. Well, but Dr. Zhang is right, in the sense that without the pilot scheme, the green farmer would buy HOS flats instead of the PRH flats available in the pilot scheme, thereby vacating more PRH flats. When the idea, the idea is first introduced in the policy address, and yet in the formulation of a long-term housing strategy, we have heard views from grassroots, from concerned groups, for another home ownership letter to be made available to them. And I think apart from the 39 TPS estates, there are also views that no more TPS estates should be launched. Now, I think before we launch the pilot scheme, it is important to consider the public's views on, say, eligibility criteria, pricing, restriction on transfer of flats, locations, etc. We will take into account all these views. I'm sorry, Secretary, but this is a total disrespect on the deliberation process of the long-term housing strategy committee. We always hear different views. Of course, there is always the wish from sitting tenants to buy their own flats. And yet, having considered all these views, none has been included in your long-term housing strategy report. And before the announcement of the policy address, nobody ever heard of this scheme. And we're talking about making available for sale new PRH flats. So right after the long-term housing strategy committee's work, you then come up with this green farm home ownership pilot scheme to reduce the number of PRH flats for rent. This is really hard to swallow. Mr. Lee Chuk-yan. Well, quick questions and answers. Professor Zhang, in fact, in the long-term housing strategy report, you rejected the idea of selling PRH flats. Is it the case that it was C.Y. Leung himself who proposed the sale of PRH flats to green farmers? Thereby, you have no alternative but to roll out this pilot scheme. Secretary, now in the deliberation process, the LTHS committee had different views in the community. My question is, this is proposed by C.Y. Leung because the LTHS already rejected the idea. Why is it that it's still contained in the policy address? Is it because you had no idea that this will be included in the policy address? Or is it that C.Y. Leung forced it down your throat and forced you to accept it? Well, I made it clear that in a long-term housing strategy. But the LTHS has completed its work. Now, it's said that we're going to enrich the ways of home ownership. And we can further consider suggestions and ideas in the community. Well, Madam Chair, obviously, he is refusing to answer my question. So, obviously, this is a top-down approach with unknown motive. C.Y. Leung is bulldozing it through. But one of the major consequences is that if you roll out this green farm home ownership pilot scheme, the PRH waiting list would get longer because instead of allowing PRH applicants to take new PRH flats, you put up the new PRH flats for sale. And it may take about half a year to apply for the purchase of flats. So the flat would be left idle and vacant for half a year. And after the sale, the tenant will have to say if the tenant moves out from the existing place, then the PRH flat will have to be renovated again for the next tenant. So although you give a pledge of 3 years average waiting time for PRH applicants, it will be even harder to achieve. And about circulation, it's just HA funds that will be circulated. In terms of circulation of flats, definitely the progress will be slowed down. The purpose of public rental housing is for the poor who have been subject to, who have been means tested to have a public rental housing flat. But now the purpose has changed. If you say that this has been given some thorough thinking, then let me ask you, out of the 200,000, how many would be public housing, how many would be HOS, and everything would be chaotic. Just tell me your answer on PRH waiting list first. In the LTHS paper, the government aims at maintaining the 3-year waiting time for PRH applicants from the time of registration to the first housing offer. And this is the basis on which we work on the plan.
Please tell us whether the waiting time for general applicants will be longer because of the introduction of the green farm home ownership pilot scheme, because you sell new flats to the PRH tenants, and the tenants will have to be refurbished. That takes time. Why don't you answer this question? Well, I certainly give you an answer. Of course, it needs time to refurbish the flat once it's vacated by the tenant. Usually, it's a 10-month difference. It's just a 10-week difference. But what about the time needed for selling the PRH flats? We count the time from the point we recover the PRH unit. For unit 10 weeks for refurbishment, but you also sell the new PRH units, and the time is sometimes is needed to sell the new flats. How much time is needed? Well, it's pre-sale. It's just like there's a pre-sale arrangement, just like HOS units. We will take the suggestions on board when we work out the details. Well, Chairperson, we should get a paper. They just invented some new policies like that. Mr. Tony Chia, for this administration, housing issue is the paramount issue. It's been in office for more than 2 years, and to the general public, property prices are high and affordable. And there are surveys saying that we are number one in terms of affordability. You have to save every penny for 17 years before you can afford one. Do you agree that property prices are too high now, Secretary? As the Secretary responsible for housing matters, do you agree that property prices are too high? And what kind of price level would be deemed reasonable to you? Well, that's important for you as the policy maker, because you need to have a target in setting your policies. Many people are not eligible for subsidized housing, and because of the high property prices, they cannot afford to buy in the private market. Should we help these people? Housing need is a basic need. So the government should come up with some way to help different social strata. Even the grassroots have housing problems. Even the middle class are facing housing problems. Do you have any ideas as to what can be done? Secretary. Well, as the Secretary responsible for the housing portfolio, I cannot just say subjectively what kind of housing property prices would be reasonable, but I can always say that whether property prices are beyond people's affordability. We have introduced the true demand-side management measures, and they are devised on this basis. If we look at the affordability from the third quarter last year, we look at the mortgage repayment as a ratio to income. It was 57%, compared with second quarter 2014, which was a 53.6, is even more unaffordable. From 1994 to 2003, in the 20 years, the average of the ratio was 47.3%. So from this perspective, prices are getting more and more unaffordable. Of course, you can make reference to the mortgage to income ratio, but now people cannot afford to buy, so they tend to buy smaller and smaller flats. I can afford to pay $5 million to buy a $5 million flat. Instead of 500 square feet, now I can afford a 350 square feet flat. The government may not be able to tell what price level is reasonable, but you can look at the affordability. Do you just look at the mortgage to income ratio or should you also look at the quality of housing? The Secretary, I think, is more concerned about public housing. You should pay more attention to private housing market, because there are many people who live in private flats. As Secretary for Housing, I'm not just responsible for public housing, I'm also responsible for private housing. But of course, land is not under my portfolio. I also use the term high property prices in my speech. In 2014, according to the Rating Evaluation Department's survey, the property prices increased by 13%. But Hong Kong is not the only place with such kind of price increase. Sydney got an increase of 16%. London similarly had registered such an increase. That's because of global low interest environment and quantitative easing exercises. Mr. Leung Ko-hong, I've always said that Professor Cheung is an honest teacher. Why is this so different from the long-term housing strategy? Because according to C.Y. Leung, there are infinite possibilities between long-term housing strategies and between the long-term housing strategy and the longer-term housing strategy. You work so hard to formulate the long-term housing strategy. We chip in, and after all, everything is done. The CE didn't say anything about long-term housing strategy. So it's not there. That's why people use this catchphrase to describe him. According to the mortgage to income ratio, it's unaffordable. Prices are unaffordable. I've talked to an estate agent, and I was told that the smaller the lump sum, that is the down payment, the smaller the flat, because that's the kind of flat people can afford. So the size gets smaller and smaller. And even in remote districts, they are fetching similarly high prices. So the market has been distorted to such an extent, and you are saying that nothing can be done. How ridiculous. Well, why should we be sympathetic towards C.Y. Leung? Did we force him to say that this is of paramount importance? That there's the deep-seated conflict that the property developers are trying to get too big a profit. Well, he said it when he went to the districts in 2011, and the DAB, the FTU were all there to echo his views. Well, Obama said he would withdraw from Iraq after election. He has won the election. Can he then go back on his words? Of course not. It's a waste of time. No one told C.Y. Leung to go after this deep-seated conflict. He thought of it. He conjured up such an idea himself, and now he wants to sell PRH units. Is he so crazy? Why don't you build more HOS units? You are saying that there's no net loss. People buying a new PRH unit would mean that an old PRH unit will be released. So you are telling these people that you are too poor to afford other flats, just so you have to buy PRH units. The policy has been in suspension for 20 years. C.Y. Leung was there to help Mr. C.H. Tung in coming up with the housing target of 85,000. He was also responsible for other housing policies, including the flotational link rate, and the problems have not been resolved. So everyone can say that I'm not responsible, but he's an exception, because he was the convener of EXCO after Sir S.Y. I want to take him to task. The housing policies implemented after the responsibility are all related to his duty. I've been talking about the problems. Miss Chen Yunhan, Miss Alice Mack have all been talking about the same thing. We have been asking for you to come up with solutions. Have you really talked to him on the possible solutions? It's ridiculous that you are not going to consider introducing a rent control. Rent control would mean hard time preceded by of hard time to be followed by good time. You should wait for the next round. Well, if the property prices continue to rise, and if I support you, then you have to kill yourself, and I have to kill myself. Please wait for the next round, Mr. Leung Kwok-hong. Well, Mr. 689 says housing is the paramount issue. The more emphasis he put to an issue, the more disaster the matter will be. This is the hardest hit policy area since the reunification. It's a lie that you can allocate a PRH unit to waiting list applicants. And you are now learning to tell lies from C.Y. Leung. I've been handling many cases where the applicants have been waiting for 5 to 6 years. And the answer is that the first offer was already made. They offered units next to the garbage room. Of course, no one would want those units, and you can always fulfill the pledge of first offer within 3 years. We understand that under the long-term housing strategy, we cannot really get 480,000 units. It's doomed to be a failure. But you are the secretary. You are responsible for social and public policy, and I don't expect you to be socially conscious. And I don't think that you would have any conscience, but you have at least to show a little bit of sense of responsibility and do something within your power to improve the housing supply. The so-called Green Farm Home Ownership Pilot Scheme is just robbing the poor to subsidize the poorer. It's going to be the hardest hit period. In 2012, we got only 9,000 odd PRH units, the second lowest in many years. There was a 1 year in which we get 7,700. Last year it's 9,000 something. This year just 10,000 units.
So if you want to put up new PRH flats for sale, this will be totally unfair to people on the PRH waiting list. This is robbing the poor. This is shameful. C.Y. Leung wants to roll out new policies, new initiatives to make himself known. And for the existing applicants, the resources will be taken away from them for those with better means, and he should be condemned. We've submitted our recommendation to FS and Chief Secretary. To tackle housing problem, the short-term solution is to allow some 3,000 HOS flats to be rented out. If HOS flats at the moment do not require payment of premium and can be led to PRH applicants, then administratively this should be introduced as soon as possible, because in fact we are already seeing this phenomenon of PRH sitting tenants letting their flats to their friends and relatives. We're talking about people paying $50 per square feet. These people with just thousands of dollars monthly income have to pay rent of $50 per square foot. So, well, as I said when I replied to Mr. Wong Kwok Heng, Mr. Wu Chiu just now, and also as Mr. Chan put it just now, on whether we could allow subletting of HOS flats, I already mentioned that we have considerations as far as the policy and the laws are concerned. I won't say that we will rule out the possibility. This issue is complex. Any means to increase public housing supply, we'll try our best to explore the feasibility if it's within the legal and policy framework. Well, this is the quickest solution. Some 300,000 HOS flats could save the 200,000 applicants on the PRH waiting list. Of course, there are still those who are not even eligible, and they are in even a greater plight. But this can really help a lot of low-income earners. Well, this is just a technical point. The administration will be able to come up with an outcome if after weeks of study. Can you give us your view? I can only say that we will take into account your view. Next, Mr. Raymond Wong. Now, the policy address and the policy agenda mentions housing initiatives, but all these old wine in new bottles. Now, CY Leung cannot tackle housing problems at all. Well, you have all the say when you say that there is a demand-supply imbalance, soaring property prices, high rental. Well, it's like saying that the Pope is Catholic. All these problems have been pointed out by many people over the years. You officials should be here to resolve problems, not just to point out problems. What's the point of blowing up figures and manipulating figures? About the long-term housing strategy, some 480,000 flats will be provided, and as a 10-year housing target with a certain private-public mix. I can tell you, I can make it clear, I'm sure that this target cannot be met. 480,000 in 10 years' time, meaning 48,000 per year for public housing. 28,800 per year, meaning 144,000 in 10 years. 48,000 flats only seeks to extend the lie of 74,000 units mentioned a few years ago. So can you say that you can meet the target? There are 260,000 applications for PRH at the moment, when even a flat in the NT would cost 12,000 per square feet, and there is an oversubscription of 59 times on the HOS flat. How can you say that you still you can resolve the problem? I'm just talking about logic. How can you say that you can adopt this supply-led strategy? Well, in fact, you're making a big profit. The application form costs $100 each, and you can already pocket $10 million. Well, there is no way to win Mark 6. People place a bet to win Mark 6. There is still a chance to win Mark 6. And the application form costs $100 and you've pocketed over $10 million, would you say that the administrative cost is over $10 million? And also about the green farm home ownership schemes, it will provide another way of home acquisition. Well, the point is, this is only common sense that it has already lost its function. I mean, the home ownership scheme flats can no longer perform its function. How can you call it another rung on the housing ladder? I can tell you, you will fall if you try to climb on this rung. Oversubscription of 59 times with less than 10% of green farmers for HOS flats. They won't be able to afford it, even if you give such a proportion to green farmers. With an income of less than $20,000, how can you ask them to pay for a flat at such a price? Well, at present, the price is set at some $3 million. With better locations, the price could be higher. So there hasn't been any increase in housing supply. All these problems remain. The status PRH applicants would actually cause a longer waiting time for other PRH applicants. Other ongoing initiatives are not worthy of mentioning. Combating abuse of PRH resources. The HA, although having done some work in the past, haven't really learned a lesson. According to the recent audit report, well, there are households abusing the harmonious family schemes to occupy several flats. So why are there so many staff in the housing department? It's a waste of resources. We should have a public accounts committee meeting. You can't even do that. Mr. Leung Yu Chung, followed by Dr. Kwok Kak-Ki and Joseph Lee. Now, on the Green Farm Home Ownership Scheme, in fact, it was discussed, according to Secretary, when deliberating on long-term housing strategy on improving the system. I think you're lying. You're telling lies. Because the conclusion of the consultation exercise made no mention of the scheme. The scheme wasn't announced until the policy address this year. So you're actually telling lies about the LTHS having deliberated on the scheme. If it had been discussed, then it would have been mentioned, so your argument doesn't hold water. Another point, according to the member, this scheme doesn't work because it takes time to renovate the flat, and it takes, say, 10 weeks time, and you answer that the 10 weeks time is only for renovation. But what about leaving the flat idle for awaiting renovation? According to recent reports, some flats have been left idle for 6 months for workers to be available for renovation, and you haven't taken into this into account. Thirdly, for PRH applicants, they would like to have a new flat. Now they're depriving them of the chance of a new PRH flats. Why must they be allocated old flats only? Why not new flats? Of course, under the existing system, yes, they might still get an old flat. But if you are putting up new flats for sale, you are taking the chance away from PRH applicants so that they get even a slimmer chance of being allocated the new PRH flats. So why is it that existing PRH applicants on the list must could have no alternative but old flats only? So the point is all about cooperating with this year's policy address. You also mentioned that this will improve circulation of PRH and allow more applicants to get PRH flats. Now the purpose is for PRH flats to be circulated. The lack of circulation is because of higher property prices. The purpose of HOS is to improve PRH circulation. And although HOS is set at 70% of the market price, the people can no longer afford HOS flats. That accounts for a lack of circulation. And why didn't you review the situation to lower the threshold from 70%? Why is it that because if you do that, people would ask why private property prices remain so high. Instead of pushing down HOS prices, you allow HOS prices to follow the market trend. So in terms of your whole housing policy, it's a total failure. I advise you the following. First of all, the HOS price level should be lowered from the 70% of market price threshold. Secondly, can the HOS flat only be sold in the secondary market? Can't it be sold back to the government for reallocation to those in need? Why isn't there such a restriction? Thirdly, about the Green Farm Home Ownership Pilot Scheme. Can you call to a halt and allow existing PRH applicants, waiting list applicants to get new flats? Well, about the HOS flat pricing, it's not fixed at 70% of the market price. We also consider whether it is in line with the formula on affordability of the HOS applicant. And in the past, we had the experience of giving more greater discount than 70%. And just now, the member also admitted that we had increased housing supply, and we hope that housing supply or public housing supply will continue. Then do you agree that the pilot scheme would deprive applicants, waiting list applicants of a chance of being allocated new flats? They get a smaller chance anyway. Well, about details of the pilot scheme, the locations, number of flats, we have yet to set out the details. It's not the case that all new flats will come under the Green Farm Home Ownership Pilot Scheme. So we'll need to wait for details. On long-term housing strategy, I agree with Mr. Leung that indeed in the LTHS paper we never mentioned the Green Farm Home Ownership Pilot Scheme. But in the deliberation process, we did hear a lot of views. And last year, when we received the LTHS report, we then considered the points to follow up, and there were voices in the community asking us not to consider only the LTHS report but other views. And that is why when the report was finally released at the end of last year, we said that we will enrich the ways of home ownership in society, and we're still awaiting details, and in the process we'll continue to listen to views.
Dr. K.K. Kwok, Chairperson, I think the policy can be described as something despicable, and they are useless. C.Y. Leung talked about the production figure at a historical high. 20 years ago, in the British colonial era, in 1994, 34,200 units were produced. In 1989, 36,500 were produced. The highest number of HOS units was produced in 1992, 22,000. So you are doing a poorer job than the colonial government. No longer some people, young people, wave the Hong Kong flag. And now the C.Y. Leung talk about a historical high figure. He's trying to change or alter history, like the Japanese. And the government has been talking about 150 sites for housing. for example, Phase 1, Phase 2 in the Central and Western District, and 15 other sites in Tuen Mun. So many sites. How about the implementation date? None. None has any completion date attached. In 2011, if we trust you that the problems could be resolved, for example, you have the anti-cyclical measures, and if people believed you then they would suffer most. Now they cannot afford to buy a home, rent is very high. If I were you, I have to cover my face when I'm on the street. And this year, you have to enforce the law against illegal housing. There's a Tuen Wan, industrial building illegally converted. But you want to evict those living there. You have to let them. You have to rehouse them. Where should they go? And now you are urging the private developers to sell their flats. But do we have any statistics on land ownership of private property owners? The answer is nothing. They don't know. You know, those developers, named Lee or Kwok, hold on to all the land. They control when the flats will be put up for sale, and the public are at their mercy. So, Secretary, do you have any advice for people living in subdivided flats, people waiting to be housed in a PRH unit, and couples who cannot afford to buy? What's your advice to them? Ask them to continue to live in a subdivided flat? Or if I tell these people living in subdivided flats that we don't need PRH units, then I'll be lying. We should build more. How? We should try to find more land. And that's why we'll sell out in the reply that the sites being processed by the Development Bureau. You talk about there's no date of completion because it's still being processed. Every year we'll come to this council to tell us that in the next 5 years, in terms of PRH and other housing supply, housing size, how much will be available. You talk about the 2 anti-cyclical measures being ineffective, but without those 2 measures, we will be in a worse situation in the housing market. So I cannot agree that those measures should not be introduced. Some people have criticized us that those measures were not strict enough. You talk about back then you talk about increasing housing production. And do you agree that it's a lie that the production figure is at an historical high? As I've said, starting from 2004, since we have 2000 we have quarterly, the statistics published is at a record high. Oh, so that's sophistry. You're just playing a game with words. Dr. Joseph Lee. Madam Chair, I have 3 questions on the housing initiatives in the policy address. The Secretary's boss, the CE, has said time and again that we cannot reintroduce the rent control. There are people who are not eligible for PRH. They are renting in the private market and they pay high rent. So they have been asking whether we can have rent control again. And now the rent control is really about protecting the right of the owner. The flat can be taken back when the lease is when the lease expires. So what are you going to do to help these people? Say something. I don't have good solutions. You may say that giving them a cash subsidy is not pragmatic, not practical. There are people who cannot afford private housing. They are not eligible for public rental housing. There are quite a few of them. What are you going to do to help them? Second, with regard to abuse of public rental housing resources, maybe we're talking about well-off tenants as well. I think the housing policy should be one that you assist those with housing needs, and when their needs are no longer there, they should leave the PRH sector. Maybe you should increase the rent by 1 time, 2 times. But you have the well-off tenant policy, and they can remain and enjoy subsidized housing. And at the same time, waiting list applicants have to wait for a longer period. And I hate to refer to individual tenants holding on to 3 units at the same time. So do you still need the well-off tenant policy? And what can you do to help people who are not eligible for PRH, who cannot afford to buy? In some housing estates, we have some luxury cars parked in the car park owned by well-off tenants. And also selling PRH units is nothing new. You can call it any name you want. But the PRH units for sale scheme failed. I'm not an expert in fixing prices of PRH units. If you ask those on the waiting list to buy new PRH units, as you said, you will not affect the waiting list. Well, if they can afford to buy, they won't be on the waiting list. If after the vetting you tell them they can buy instead of rent, what about the mortgage payment? Would they be able to afford it if interest rate goes up? What kind of logic lies behind such a scheme? Do you want to allow people to get allocated units faster? Is that such a consideration? I just find the logic behind the scheme strange. If I sell the PRH units as HOS units to sitting tenants or to HOS applicants, then it can be understood. But how come you can sell the PRH units to waiting list applicants? Can the Secretary enlighten us with some figures? And please tell us if there are waiting list applicants buying the new PRH units, how much faster would it be for waiting list applicants to get units? Well, you know, Dr. Joseph Lee was a Housing Authority member. We are talking about people who have been vetted and who will be able to use the green form to buy HOS if they have passed the vetting. But of course, some waiting list applicants may not be able to afford to buy PRH units. But of these green formers who are not tenants, and some 6% of the buyers belong to this category. Most of them were the PRH tenants who buy an HOS unit as green formers. And after that, the PRH units that they used to rent will be released for other waiting list applicants. For well-off tenants, we charge a higher rent. At a certain stage, they will be asked to go. The Subsidized Property Committee of the Housing Authority is reviewing the relevant policy. Mr. Tan Ka Pil, in terms of the Green Form Home Ownership Pilot Scheme, it's different from the TPS, Tenants Purchase Scheme, because you are selling an entire new block to buyers. So that will spare you from management problems because of the mixed ownership of TPS estates. And sometimes tenants and owners cannot agree how to tackle certain problems such as water seepage. And now you want to allow the PRH tenants to gain access to another home ownership channel. But you have to make it clear what kind of reselling options will be available. And that is to say, if the flats can be resold in the open market, and now we have PRH units being sold in the market at $3 million plus, that's very undesirable. So you should spell out the resale restrictions. And that's the one in Tuen Mun, one in the Chongqing. People have been asking that you should make sure that in every district you have such a green form home ownership estates, because they don't want, they may not like to sacrifice a lot and go to live in another district. These are some of the views I've heard from residents or tenants meeting in public rental housing estates, and that's an ombudsman's report saying that one household occupies more than one unit, and they were due house tenancy status. And I understand that some of the cases are related to divorce people. But now, because of shortage of PRH, compassionate housing is more difficult to get. Can you tell us whether there are more or fewer units allocated on the ground of compassionate market? Have you tightened up the eligibility because of the shortage of supply of PRH? Well, actually, the HA will allocate a certain number of units for compassionate housing every year, but it is not a hard target. We will be we're always flexible. As for the Ombudsman's report on one household occupying 3 units, that's actually not the full picture. Mr. Stanley Ying has actually written an article for the newspapers explaining the case. If I may later submit a copy to members for reference. We cannot use one yardstick to handle all the 170,000 PRH tenants. So we have to deal with cases such as overcrowded households or underutilization units. We cannot be too rigid.
Or restrictions on sale. We'll carefully consider the arrangement, because this is the view expressed after we announced the introduction of the Green Farm Home Ownership Pilot Scheme. Members can have a second round, but let me use my first round first. Last week, I had a residents' meeting in Tin Shui Wai, and there was a pregnant lady who waited till the end of the residents' meeting at 10 p.m. and told me in tears that she and her husband now had a total income of $23,000 that exceeded the income and asset limit, for PRH housing, and the household of 6, together with her mother-in-law, is living in a 4-person household or 4-person unit. And after the baby is born, she won't even find a space for the baby cot. She could opt for private housing, but that she would need to pay a rent of $8,000, $9,000. And after contributing to family, she would have no money left. So what she's having in mind is to allow the baby to share a bed with the couple. And I'm really concerned whether the lady would have prenatal depression. For those earning more than $23,000 who are not eligible for public rental housing, but who cannot afford private housing, for this group, be it long-term housing strategy or the initiatives in the policy address, is there anything that can help these people? You say no to rent control and other suggestions. Will the Green Farm Home Ownership Pilot Scheme help? If you say that she could use the pilot scheme, that means her mother-in-law would need to give up the existing PRH flat for applying for a flat under the pilot scheme. I'm really concerned about this lady. The other point is about HOS flats for lease without paying premium. Well, you say it's complex. Well, in fact, in many housing estates, well, these HOS owners do not aim at making a profit. I can tell you that nowadays it's really hard for children to make family contribution to parents. And what these parents would like to do is to sublet the HOS flat in order to make a living. And you say that this is too complex, too difficult. Well, you have come up with the very complex Green Farm Home Ownership Pilot Scheme anyway. What measures do you have to help them in terms of leasing HOS flats? Now, thirdly, just some calculations. When a new PRH block can be made available to purchasers in the Green Farm Pilot Scheme, let's say if the 1,000 PRH flats were put up for allocation to waiting list applicants instead of sale to PRH green farmers under the pilot scheme, from taking back the existing PRH flats for renovation to further allocation, how long does it take? Well, I'll defer to my colleague, Deputy Director, to take your question on the time needed for such a circulation of PRH. Now, about the household earning $23,000 and thereby not eligible for public rental housing. In fact, every day we come across people with different background, with different needs, with different income. This is exactly the challenge that we face. On the one hand, we don't want to favor sitting tenants. We need to cater for the needs of PRH waiting list applicants. At the same time, there are voices in the community that we should do more to help people slightly above the PRH tenant level to acquire their own home. And no matter how you divide the pie, there will be some who may complain that they're not being looked after. So what we do is we try our best. But that depends on whether the community has consensus on the fact that this is a major issue and priority should be given. Now, on subletting HOS flats, as I answered other members before, I won't reject the idea outright, but I would just want to point out that this is a complex issue. Now, what will be the society's perception over profit made by subletting HOS flats, that those well-off tenants have already been called names, and we need to be careful about the concept and the allegations of subdivided units. Now, I believe our members have been asking about the Green Farm Home Ownership Pilot Scheme, and the details like income asset limits, waiting time, etc. I think that when you come up with details, it will be discussed at the Housing Authority. I think it's pointless for us to keep on criticizing you. So when you have more details, please report back to the panel. We have run over time. I don't think he'll be able to answer you. So second round, 2 minutes. Just give your views. KK Fong. Now for Tai Hang Sai Estate, before the announcement of the policy address, Lee Sew Kay said that the Tai Hang Sai Estate site would be developed into subsidized housing, and then the HKHS and the HKSCL would also be assisting in the project. And then Mr. Lee said that the youth hostel, rather than subsidized housing, would be built when Tai Hang Sai Estate is redeveloped. And in the following day, the government came out and said that it has nothing to do with HA. Well, in short, it's just within a week's time, and there were 4 different versions for the Tai Hang Sai Estate residents. And in a phone-in program last week on RTHK, I want to quote from the conversation in a few months before, during a meal gathering. The CE was present, and Professor Kwan Chek-jiu, he when being asked by the CE on views of the housing supply in Hong Kong, he said that he was worried that the Green Farm Home Ownership Pilot Scheme would be put in the policy address. Now, my question is this. Despite months of hard work by the LTHS LTHS committee, and just overnight, because of what CE said, everything changed from the LTHS. I really had a quarrel with Professor Kwan on the radio program. Why would APRH resources be used for sale rather than dividing HOS flats into 2 tiers? Well, Dr. Kwan mentioned an occasion when the CE was also present. I don't recall this occasion. Secondly, about the different versions put forward by Mr. Lee Sew Kay and the government and myself. Well, I am just giving this remark from the perspective of the government. Is not that after Mr. Lee made some remarks, I must accept it. As for Tai Hang Sai Estate, it's under the Hong Kong SCHL, and I just want to clarify the fact that there is no intention of the Hong Kong SHCL to give the site over to the government. Dr. Fernando Zhang. I think the people of Hong Kong nowadays understand that the government changes its version every day. Well, we had this long-term housing strategy, and we thought that the government would really follow its plan. But now the CE has come up with something new about the sale of subsidized flats. For a 4P household, the existing income limit for a 4P household for PRH flat is 23,910. Now, for a mortgage period of 25 period with an interest rate of 2.3%, that means the household would need to pay a mortgage payment of $8,333. That means the household will have $15,577 to spend. According to the Commission on Poverty, the poverty line is set at $15,400. So that means the household can be regarded as a household in poverty. We're talking about a flat in Kwong Yun Estate with a sellable area of 400 square feet. The per square foot price was $10,507. And let's not talk about the recent example in Fanling. Let's talk about this example in Kwong Yun Estate for 400 square feet flat. After giving a 50% discount, the price would be $2 million. So the household would be living below the poverty line. So, Secretary, how would the pricing be set to help households meeting the PRH income limit in buying the PRH flat in the pilot scheme? I suppose you're talking about the pilot scheme. Now, the pilot scheme, as I said just now, is not targeting existing PRH waiting list applicants. Instead, it's targeting green farmers who have the means. On pricing, of course, we need to consider affordability. We're not forcing anyone to buy flats. Before buying a flat, one should always consider one's affordability. We're not forcing anyone to buy the flat. Also, we also need to consider the fairness in terms of different subsidized flats available. Mr. Leung Kwok-hong, coming back to my previous point, for the draconian measures, you asked members to support you, and the consequence is clear. That is, the purchase power is held back at the moment. And when the measures are relaxed, definitely prices will go up again. So that is to give sweeteners first for sufferings to come later. Now, about rent control, this is letting people suffer first before giving sweeteners later. Yes, people may decide not to rent out their flats, but they can't do it forever. If the policy aims at a drop in property prices, the banks would approach those owners. You should let them know that they are the target and that they would have to suffer. Have you come up with any ways to do that? Instead of telling us rent control is not pragmatic or impractical, what is the logic? We know that the time bomb will explode in 2 years, and yet you want to have it now. If you can do something that can stop the suffering in the coming 10 years, why don't you do it now? There are ways to do it. Just stop property prices from going up. Why don't you give this a thought? Well, what is the logic? Have you discussed with CE? Have you made any assessment? Secretary. Of course, the CE takes part in policy formulation. What happens if purchase power increases again? Dr. Kwok-Aki, I think in terms of housing policy, this government is incurable. I hope Secretary would not follow CY Leung's footstep. So, if you want private property developer to provide more flats to meet the needs of those who can barely afford to buy their own homes, I don't think this is the solution, because property developers may play tricks on you. So the solution is to build HOS flats on these sites. Because in Fanling, Secretary, today the per square foot price is 17,000 already. People can afford a flat, but they can't afford a flat at such a price level. You see oversubscription of HOS flats by 100 times. Tin Wing Station site is a good example for government to rectify the situation. If you could have HOS development there. For Tin Wing Station, Secretary, tender exercise already started. We don't know whether the tender has been aborted now. So for other superstructure development on MTR stations that government has a say, can we reserve some for HOS development, because this will really help those who can't afford to own a home nowadays.
We have to take care of the welfare of different people, those who cannot afford to rent in the private market, the middle class who cannot afford to buy, and there are people who cannot afford to buy or who are not eligible to buy HOS. Then they have to buy in the private market. So we cannot reduce the supply of housing in the private market. Well, time is limited. We have exceeded the allotted time. We have to move on to the next item, although some members would like to ask questions for the third round. We now move on to the next item, refining the quota and points system and checking the eligibility of applicants under the quota and points system. Is paper CP1384 1415 bracket 06 and another paper bracket 07. This is an item left over from the last meeting. I'd like to welcome the officials joining us for this item. I understand there's a PowerPoint presentation from Ms. Wong. Well, my colleague will be doing this. Please make it brief. Is Mr. Hong? Yes. Please make it brief.
首先呢，就其實係幾張投影片啦，講一講房。
First, the HA has revised the quota and points system. First, we are going to increase the annual quota. The annual quota will increase from 8% to 10% of the total number of flats to be allocated to general and QPS applicants, and the cap will increase from 2,000 to 2,200 units. That would be implemented starting from the 2015-2016 allocation plan. Second, the point system will be refined. In the past, 18 years give you nothing, and you get 3 points when you reach 19, and another 3 points when you reach 20. Under the new system, you get 9 points instead of 3 once you advance your age by a year. So when the applicant reaches the age of 45, there will be a one-off bonus of 60 points.
係我哋引入呢個申請者資格嘅查核。咁目標群眾
This will be implemented from the 1st of February this year, and we're also going to check the eligibility of applicants for those who have waited for 5 years but have not yet due for detailed vetting within the next 2 years. We are going to invite applicants to make declarations, and then we'll randomly select applicants for submitting the documents to check. And then for dubious cases, we are going to invite applicants to attend interviews for detailed checking. And if the applicants are still within the target group, they would be subject to further checking after 5 years. And some applicants will have their application cancelled if they withdraw their applications, or they are no longer eligible for public rental housing, or they have failed to respond to paper checking and or the invitation for detailed vetting. And the applicants whose application has been cancelled can lodge an appeal in accordance with the appeal mechanism. And for those who have failed the checking but become eligible again later, they can apply for the reinstatement of the application after 6 months and within 20 more months of cancellation of their applications. And this will be implemented on the 1st of February 2015. And there will also be one-off arrangements For example, recalculation of the points awarded to individual applicants, and for those who are approaching the stage of unit allocations, and for those who are living in Long Pin interim housing who will be affected by the redevelopment plan next year. They will be covered by the one-off arrangement. It's in the paper. Paragraph 15 and paragraph 16 are relevant. Mr. Wong Kok Heng, 4 minutes. And then we have Mr. Tan Kat Peel and Mr. Dr. Fernando Zhang. Under the new arrangement, more units will be available for the allocation. I welcome this, but with regard to the new point system, maybe some of the applicants who are about to be allocated a unit, the change to a point system may have a serious implication for them. I received a message from a person called Wong Ching Ching, and the complaints system of this council received many complaints, and this person said he has been waiting for 10 years. According to their points, in another 6 months he will be eligible for vetting, and if he's qualified he will be allocated a unit. And now you give those who have reached 45 a bonus of 60 points, and then other applicants would have to wait for a longer period instead of 6 months. What are you going to do with them? Why don't you increase another quota? And that would not affect those already in the waiting list, and they don't know how much more time they will have to be kept on the waiting list. Actually, I wrote to the Director of Housing more than a year ago in respect of this case of Wong Ching Ching. The case was taken up by our complaints divisions and other meetings as well. So what are we going to do with this case? Deputy Secretary, well, the design is that for those who have reached 45, they will be getting a unit, PRH unit, earlier. So older applicants will get a unit faster, and younger applicants would get a unit later. So in terms of design, this is the implication. As for the case referred to by the member, well, it's really a case of making changes a few times. So maybe I can ask my colleague to supplement. But I don't think we should talk about a case. Perhaps you can talk about the policy. We have applicants who are about to be allocated units. What are you going to do to help them? Well, because of the changes of status, that's why the case has been with us for a long time. We have some one-off measures, as mentioned by Mr. Hong. The new system will be implemented on the 1st of February. If the case has already been registered before that, then the points will be recalculated. If under the old system they would get higher points, then we'll make up the shortfall. But as from the 1st of February, the points will be accumulated in accordance with the new system. On the 24th of October, or 14th of October last year, the Subsidized Housing Committee of HA had a discussion, and it was decided that if detailed vetting have been completed for a applicant, and they are just waiting for allocation, then they will not be affected. So that's another one-off arrangement for these applicants. So we have taken care of such cases. Of course, we should not discuss the case of Mr. Wong Ching Ching here. I hope you can give us a written reply. As regards the status of the case. But what about similar cases? For those who are already at the front of the queue, and now suddenly they are overtaken by other people, would you be willing to exercise some discretion in favor of such applicants? Before I move on, I would like to ask if other members would like to raise questions for this item, and I also have to extend the meeting for 15 minutes to complete the agenda. 260,000 people are competing for the limited public rental housing resources, and the decisions must be uncomfortable decisions. Older people and people approaching retirement may expect very little changes to their financial status and the family status. So perhaps that's the presumption you have. If that's the case, let me talk about the case of those who are under 45 and they are persons with disabilities. They cannot expect a significant improvement to their financial position. And if they cannot get compassionate housing, what should they do? It will mean that the waiting time is longer for them. My ward office has received complaints. The person is in his 30s, he's suffering from cerebral paralysis, and he thought at 34 he will have to wait for another 10 years, but now the waiting time might be 16 years. So are you going to deal with PWDs as special cases, or are you saying that they should go for compassionate housing? So if you say that those who have reached the age of 45, they are not going to expect drastic changes to their financial position, can it be applied to those in the 30s with disabilities? Well, I agree that the line is difficult to draw. In the LTHS Steering Committee report, in the Ombudsman's report, the Directors of Audit report, and the PAC report of this Council, the same point has been made. Well, for the people who are suffering from disabilities, well, they can apply under compassionate housing. Housing department staff are not in a position to decide who is in a worse position. So these people can apply under compassionate housing, or they can apply under the speedy allocation exercise annually, and also under the QPS as well. We want to make sure that our system is objective. For special cases, we have to rely on the compassionate housing arrangement. How many non-elderly 1P applicants are persons with disabilities? I don't think we have that piece of information, because no declaration to this effect is required. In our application form, we have 6 types of disabilities indicated. These 6 categories of persons with disabilities can apply for a bigger unit. But for the degree of disability and the like, we don't have such information.
Will you try to look into this issue? Dr. Fernando Zhang. Thank you, Chair. Compassionate housing has remained the same for 20 years, some 2,000 units per year. So you can imagine, comparing to the increase in the number of applicants on the waiting list and the increase in the quota for compassionate housing, this is disproportionate. Of course, for compassionate housing, it covers not only disabled applicants but also other people having urgent needs, etc. So my question is whether under the QPS, points can be given to those with disabilities. Now, bonus points will be given to applicants when they reach the age of 45. C.Y. Leung's election manifesto is very clear. He will ensure that household applicants and non-elderly 1P applicant age 35 or above have a PRH waiting time of 3 years. So for 35 years old or above, these non-elderly singleton applicants should only wait for 3 years. So, comparing this new initiative to C.Y. Leung's, your boss's objectives, how far are these two apart? Thank you. Chair, about the initiatives for those above 35 years old, the HA held a discussion, and we really need to work hard to increase housing supply. And therefore, according to the HA, the pragmatic step is to help people who reach the age of 45 by giving them a one-off bonus points. Because of the tight supply and keen demand, this is the approach that we're taking. This is the first point. On compassionate housing, we're talking about 2,000 units per year. But over the years, we've never been very rigid as to the 2,000 quota. As long as we get referral from SWD, we will incorporate the cases under compassionate housing, and very often the number exceeded 2,000. As for people with disabilities, it is difficult to determine the extent of disabilities and whether they should be awarded extra points. There is no objective standard. So what we're doing now is to adopt a more objective standard, which has been discussed by the community. As for other people with disabilities, we hope that they could be covered by the compassionate housing, and also professional assessments we have been made by the SWD and other departments, and also the number of cases is not just limited to 2,000. I recall that there have been occasions where we have more than 2,000. In fact, the assessment is not made by just any doctor, but an HA doctor. So coming back to those on disability allowance or those classified as people with disabilities in the CSSA system, then for these people applying as 1P non-elderly applicant under the QPS, more points can be awarded to them. Well, under the existing system, if he has referral from SWD or referral has been made on medical grounds, then he needs not wait in the queue, and based on the recommendation, we will make certain arrangements for compassionate housing. And this is the line that we have to draw. And in fact, this is a more relaxed approach than the existing system. That's the end of this item. So let's move on to the next one. Thank you. 1 minute, please. Madam Chair, may I ask the Housing Department to consider it? Well, as long as one gets a disability allowance, one should be allowed, because not many are eligible for DA. If you say that you are concerned that the housing department staff will not be able to make the assessment, then it should be points should be awarded on the basis of a medical certification by HA doctors. Can you consider that? This is an objective criterion. Thank you. I want to point out that under the existing system, I'm not talking about today's system. I want you to consider afresh, because you have been talking about compassionate or rehousing on compassionate grounds. In other words, well, if you were in the queue, you would be allocated a flat under compassionate housing. We're talking about those outside the queue. Now we are talking about those with disabilities and those with needs who are not eligible for compassionate housing, and because of the QPS, they are now falling back in the queue, further in the queue. So can you consider that for those with physical problems and those who have seen their position being pushed back as a result of the changes to the QPS, can you reconsider it and give us a written reply? Yes, I'll go back to think about it. Next item. Public Works Program item B757CL, roads and drains in Area 16 and Area 58D, Sha Tin. Electrical paper CB bracket 1483/1415 bracket 03. Let's invite the administration in. Let me welcome the administration to the meeting. Please go through the PowerPoint presentation briefly for us, but may I remind members that if you have any direct or indirect pecuniary interest on this item, please, in accordance with ROP Rule 83A, before you speak, disclose the nature of the interest, and would members also be reminded that in terms of the voting arrangement, where there is direct pecuniary interest, according to Rule 84. Yes, Ms. Fong. Thank you, I'm Chair. Members are invited to support the government's proposal to upgrade B757CL to Category A to support the proposed public housing development in Area 16 and Area 58D in Sha Tin. Our proposal is about widening and realigning Kwai Te San Chun Road, and also to build the relevant slope works, single two-lane carriageway, lay-bys footpaths, and also to widen a section of Wong Chuk Yung Street from Kwai Te San Chun Road to Washington Street, to a single two-lane carriageway with associated slope works, lay-bys, footpaths, and crossing facilities, and ancillary works including drainage, storage, water supply system, and landscaping works. The project seeks to support the housing project, providing 4,800 flats to be completed in 2018-19. We are going to provide drainage, storage, and water supply system, and widen the existing Kwai Te San Chun Road and Wong Chuk Yung Street, so that on realignment, the land occupied by the existing Kwai Te San Road will form part of the proposed PRH development. The government has already consulted the Traffic and Transport Committee of the Sha Tin District Council and sought members' support. We've also published a notice in the Gazette. We received one objection against the resumption of private land, and also The government clarified to the objectors that the road and drainage works under B757CL would not involve any land resumption, and also explained that the lot would be resumed for the proposed PRH development. Despite the government's explanation, the objectors maintained their objection. Now, the Scene Council, having considered the unresolved objection, authorized a scheme in accordance with the ordinance without modification on the 6th of January 2015. As for the budget project estimate, the estimated capital cost at MOD price would be $224.5 million. With members' support, we are going to submit this project to Public Works Subcommittee and Finance Committee for approval. And subject to approval by these committees, works will commence in November 2015 for completion in June 2018 to tie in with the PRH development. I urge members to support the proposal. Does any member wish to ask questions or make comments on the proposal? Dr. Fernando Zhang, 4 minutes. All right, Madam Chair, according to my understanding, the objections had to do with some villagers' concerns over whether their villages would become isolated without any transportation support after the PRH development is completed. It has to do with increasing PRH supply. Now, although according to your paper you explain that no land resumption will be involved in this project, what about ancillary works? I mean, land resumption would be involved in the actual PRH development, and there will be an impact on nearby villages because of land resumption. That's why the villagers are objecting to the PRH development, as well as the drainage works and road works. Now, I note that originally in your proposal there is no suggestion of 4,800 flats. It was just about 4,200 flats. Later, you increased the number of stories. Anyway, an increased number of flats. So can you explain to us? Although you say that this public works program item is not the same as a PRH development, this is works on roads and drains. Now, with increase in number, will there be negative impact on villages and on traffic nearby? And what will you do to try to allay the concerns? Deputy Director. Now, as we increase public housing supply, we have conducted TIAs and we have made adjustments. And the present project should be able to cope with the needs brought about by increase in the population in the area because of the PRH project. Land resumption will not be necessary for the roads and drains projects. In the phase 2 of the PRH development project, however, some private land will have to be resumed. And yet we're going to provide facilities to allow great access for villages and also for smoother traffic. Well, Madam Chair, my question is that according to the location of the site, one would have to go through the Fultan industrial estate, and there are heavy vehicles going in and out of the industrial estate, and I don't know whether it is suitable for such a large residential population to travel in and out of the estate. Of course, you said you have conducted assessments. As for residents residing in the project on its completion, what will you do to address the problems? Well, let me give a brief reply first, and then I'll defer to my colleagues. In assessing the traffic situation in the area, there is a Fulton PRH project and another project in Hoshangton in the area, and there will be road improvement works, and I'll defer to Mr. Low to say more on that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the TIA, we have covered both housing PRH projects. The traffic generator will pass quite a street, and therefore we have proposed some road improvement to be carried out. For example, at Guangzhou Yang Street, it will be turned from a single lane to a two-lane carriageway. And at Guaide Shan Chun Road, there will also be improvement to the road junctions. So after you've done so much, the people there are still not happy. Can you further accede to the request from villagers concerning further improvements? There is also a bus terminus. There will be light buses and taxis serving the area, so transport will be better. We have fine-tuned and improved many details after listening to the views of the residents, and we have even improved the road junction arrangement, and will allow right turn at one of the junctions. That's the result of a public consultation. All right, if members have no further questions, may I invite members to indicate whether you support submitting this item to the PWSE? Okay, so it's supported by members. So the administration is going to submit this to the PWSC. We move on to other AOB. Anything under AOB? If not, then meetings adjourned. The next meeting is to be held in March.